Picture of Dorian Gray, Chapter 1. In the centre of the room, clamped to an upright easel, stood the full-length portrait of a young man of extraordinary personal beauty, and in front of it, some little distance away, was sitting the artist himself, Basil Hallward, whose sudden disappearance some years ago caused at the time such public excitement and gave rise to so many strange conjectures. As he looked at the gracious and comely form he had so skilfully mirrored in his art, a smile of pleasure passed across his face and seemed about to linger there. But he suddenly started up and, closing his eyes, placed his fingers upon the lids, as though he sought to imprison within his brain some curious dream from which he feared he might awake. "It is your best work, Basil, the best thing you have ever done," said Lord Henry languidly. "You must certainly send it next year to the Grosvenor. The Academy is too large and too vulgar. The Grosvenor is the only place." "I don't think I will send it anywhere," he answered, tossing his head back in that odd way that used to make his friends laugh at him at Oxford. "No, I won't send it anywhere." Lord Henry elevated his eyebrows and looked at him in amazement through the thin blue wreaths of smoke that curled up in such fanciful whirls from his heavy opium-tainted cigarette. "Not send it anywhere? My dear fellow, why? Have you any reason? What odd chaps you painters are. You do anything in the world to gain a reputation. As soon as you have one, you seem to want to throw it away. It is silly of you, for there is only one thing in the world worse than being talked about, and that is not being talked about. A portrait like this would set you far above all the young men in England, and make the old men quite jealous, if old men are ever capable of any emotion." "I know you will laugh at me," he replied, "but I really can't exhibit it. I have put too much of myself into it." Lord Henry stretched his long legs out on the divan and shook with laughter. "Yes, I knew you would laugh, but it is quite true all the same." "Too much of yourself in it? Upon my word, Basil, I didn't know you were so vain, and I really can't see any resemblance between you with your rugged strong face, and your coal-black hair, and this young Adonis, who looks as if he was made of ivory and rose leaves. Why, my dear Basil, he is Narcissus, and you, well, of course you have an intellectual expression and all that, but beauty, real beauty, ends where an intellectual expression begins. Intellect is in itself an exaggeration and destroys the harmony of the face. The moment one sits down to think, one becomes all nose or all forehead, or something horrid. Look at the successful men in any of the learned professions. How perfectly hideous they are. Except, of course, in the church. But then in the church they don't think. A bishop keeps on saying at the age of 80 what he was told to say when he was a boy of 18. And consequently he always looks absolutely delightful. Your mysterious young friend, whose name you have never told me, but whose picture really fascinates me, never thinks. I feel quite sure of that. He is brainless, beautiful thing. Who should be always here in winter when we have no flowers to look at, and always here in summer when we want something to chill our intelligence. Don't flatter yourself, Basil. You are not in the least like him." The passage I have just read, consisting of a conversation between the society portrait painter Basil Hallward and his old friend Lord Henry Wotton, sets the scene for the appearance of the eponymous main character Dorian Gray in the next chapter. It was taken from the 1891 single book edition that I first read as an undergraduate here in the 1980s. My degree subject was modern history, and I was particularly interested in the politics and society of the 1890s, when the moral certainties of Victorian England were starting to unravel. The aesthetic movement and its devotion to the cult of beauty and decadence that Dorian Gray epitomises was certainly both challenging and controversial. W. H. Smith rejected Wilde's novel as filthy Another reviewer stated it was fit for none but outlawed noblemen and perverted telegraph boys, a direct reference to the 1889 Cleveland Street scandal, which had unmasked a male brothel patronised by the aristocracy. The fictional Dorian Gray, who was both rich and a leading member of fashionable society, was far from alone in pursuing a secret double life.